The most action-packed episode of Rings of Power is out and was giving me flashbacks of Dante's Peak.
Felt that.
In this video, we'll be taking a deep dive into the episode New Clues on who Sauron is, the creation of Mordor, and connections to Lord of the Rings. I'll also be saving spoilers for the next few episodes near the end of the video, but I'll warn you before we get to that. Now let's get into it. Adar's hand plants Alpharin seeds in the ground. These are the same types of seeds Bronwyn gave Arondir in episode 1, and in Rings lore these flowers are said to have sprouted around Elendil's tomb. Elves are said to plant these before battle, for it's said that the Valar, or those powers that shape the world, watch over those who tend to them. So it seems Adar still holds on to some of his elvish customs. And what army couldn't use a nice pep talk? And we can also see Waldrig in among the crowd. The last we saw of him, he was tasked with killing Rowan to prove his allegiance to Sauron. This is likely why Adar tasks him with one of the most important tasks, using the Sword Key to destroy the dam that will eventually cast the Southlands into darkness. Making their way to the elven outpost of Ostirith, the orcs have fallen into a trap. Last episode, Bronwyn inadvertently gave Arondir the idea to have the tower literally fall on them. Thankfully, the place has been abandoned, and while the orcs search the fortification, Adar lays his eyes on the sculpted wall. This will later find to be the lock Theo's sword will open. Adar can smell the elf, but before he can be caught, Arondir springs the trap and collapses the tower, killing many orcs in the process. This is great news for the humans, however their celebration is short-lived. Adar and his men will come for revenge, and they must fortify the small town of Tirharad. Across the Sundering Seas, Isildur is living that glorious stable boy life. We've seen how he's yearned to travel to Middle-earth, and now he has his chance on Queen Muriel's expedition to the Southlands. There he meets Galadriel for the first time. She can see the shore with her keen elven eyes, but soon it will be visible to Isildur. He's ashamed to be a stable sweep and tells Galadriel that he wants to get as far away from Numenor as possible, stating that it's not the real Numenor. I interpreted this as meaning that Numenor has strewn away from the greatness it once was and no longer stands by the ideals by which it was founded. It's too easily perverted by ambitious men like Ar-Pharazôn who seek to exploit the city for their own personal gain rather than elevate the city as a whole. The Númenóreans head toward the Bay of Belfalas, up the River Anduin, and east toward the Southlands. You may remember the River Anduin from the Fellowship of the Ring, where the Fellowship passed the Argonath, those two giant pillars of Isildur and his brother Anarion, who we haven't met yet. Of course, at this time, these monuments have been created and actually appear further up the river at Nen Hethuel. We also learn a little bit about what happened to Isildur's mother. She drowned, according to Elendil, which is somewhat ironic since she comes from a family of sailors. Back in Tirharad, Arondir attempts to break the sword by smashing it. Not sure how he thought this would work, but I guess it was worth a try. So if it can't be destroyed, he will hide it somewhere it can never be found. However, little does he know that Theo is keeping a close eye on him. This is how he knows where it is later on in the episode. Arondir, who in episode 1 was despised by the Southlanders, has now become a pseudo-leader for this ragtag group of refugees. He's devised a plan to trap the orcs using flaming wagons, having their archers pick off as many of the orcs as possible. But before the battle begins, Arondir plants these Alpharin seeds, telling Bronwyn that after this is over, they will plant the rest in a new garden where they'll live together with Theo. It's here that they have their first kiss of the show. The defense of Tirharad starts off rather successful. Many orcs are caught in the fire and mowed down with arrows while Arondir fells this giant orc with the help of Bronwyn. But just when it looks like the villagers have fended off the orc invasion, they come to a startling realization. Many of the attackers aren't orcs at all, but their fellow Southlanders who swore themselves to Adar. This was but a preliminary attack preceding the full force of Adar's orc army. In the second attack, both Bronwyn and our poor Treadwell are shot with arrows as the defending villagers barricade themselves within the tavern. Here, Theo must cauterize his mother's wound as she comes close to death. But Adar is on the move, and at first I was like, how come he doesn't burn the entire building down with everyone inside? And then I realized he needs that sword. Only by interrogating those inside can he find out where it is. With Bronwyn's head literally on the chopping block, Theo gives in and retrieves the blade from a tile beneath the tavern floor. I guess Arondir really needs to work on his hiding spots. And while it looks like all is lost for our Southlanders, spoilers, Adar hears the sound of galloping horses. The Númenóreans have arrived, more than evening the playing field. It's important to note at this moment, Adar tells Waldreg he has an important task for him. This is where the handoff of the sword is done, and we'll later find Adar has tricked Galadriel and given her a fake. The battle is filled with ton of little moments like Galadriel's sick moves, I guess you pick up a thing or two when you're thousands of years old, Valandil saves Ontimo, and the Queen allows Isildur to gain some much needed fighting experience. There's also this moment where Isildur comes to his father's aid after being saved by Halbrand, a definite nod to him doing the same thing at the War of the Last Alliance, which leads to him cutting off the finger holding Sauron's One Ring of Power. Adar runs off with this decoy weapon with Galadriel and Halbrand chasing after him. This is most likely a diversion so that Waldreg can use the real sword to destroy the dam. Eventually they're able to stop this dark elf, and Halbrand asks if he remembers him. There's some history between these two, but Adar does not recall who he is. Did he kill someone in his family? We just don't know. However, this episode, more than any prior, has led me to believe that Halbrand could be Sauron. I've seen a few other videos claiming this and dismissed them for lack of evidence, thinking Halbrand would be more of a Nazgul. However, there were a ton of suspicious things in this episode that had me questioning everything. Let's take a look at the evidence. At the end of the episode, Halbrand becomes the de facto king of the Southlanders, an area which will become Mordor. What better position to be in if you're Sauron? Plus, no one has ever seen this guy before, and the only link to any sort of noble line is this emblem he carries around. Everyone just kinda buys into him being king, which I thought was very convenient. In the book, Sauron is said to be a master manipulator and sorcerer. Who knows what this Halbrand character is doing to sway people to his will. When Halbrand confronts Adar, he asks the Dark Elf if he knows who he is. We're led to believe Adar may have killed Halbrand's family, but there's no evidence of that. What if Halbrand wants to kill Adar for a different reason, as revenge for killing Sauron? Later on in the episode, Adar tells Galadriel that he killed the Dark Lord. Maybe this is why Halbrand asked if he knew him, not because of his family, but because he is in fact the Dark Lord resurrected. In the book, Sauron at this time was known to take a quote, fair visage, so him looking like you or I, and not some disfigured dark elf, makes more sense. But the biggest clue that leads me to believe he is Sauron is this brief scene between Galadriel and Halbrand, where there is the slightest inkling the two could be falling in love. He talks about how fighting alongside her has, quote, given him this feeling, and even talks about wishing he could bind it to his being. Bind is also an interesting word since it's part of the famous quote regarding the One Ring, and in the darkness bind them. And Galadriel feels this feeling too. Both of them share a look, and as they're interrupted, Galadriel lets out this kind of quivering sigh. Am I crazy here, guys, or is this the start of Halbrandriel? Galbrand? We can work on the name. But what better person for Galadriel to fall in love with than the person she has sworn to kill? From a narrative and storytelling perspective, Halbrand just makes sense. Back in town, the battle is over. Valandil has managed to get spots for Isildur and Ontimo on a special mission led by Galadriel to track down the remaining orcs. Ontimo decides to stay back, considering how close he came to death during the battle, so it'll be interesting if this is the last we see him. Galadriel interrogates Adar in the same barn where Theo first found the sword. She calls him a Moriondor, son of the Dark, a twisted elf by Morgoth, but he prefers to be referred to as Uruk, which is black speech for orc. After Morgoth's defeat, Sauron devoted himself to healing Middle-earth and sought to craft a power that could harness the Unseeing World. The Unseeing World, or the Wraith World, is that place Frodo goes while wearing the ring. Something was missing for Sauron to harness this power, thus he traveled to that fortress we saw in episode 1, which may be Morgoth's first fortress of Autumno. There, Adar sacrificed his children, the orcs, as part of Sauron's quest for this dark knowledge needed to harness the power of the unseen world. Adar did not like this, and if we're to believe him, he killed Sauron. There he set out to give his children a home in the Southlands. The only problem is that his children can't roam about during the day, so he devised an ingenious plan to detonate the volcano, casting the land in a dark haze of ash. You may remember last episode he stared up at the sun, lamenting that he'll miss it. This mountain is what will be known as Mount Doom, and by unleashing the dam's water through an intricate series of tunnels, the cool water will mix with the volcano's lava, causing a gigantic eruption. But before this happens, Galadriel pulls her blade on Adar, vowing to eradicate every last orc, leaving him the last to die. He recognizes that she is no better than he. Filled with bloodlust and revenge, she too is an Uruk. This time it's Halbrand who stops Galadriel from killing Adar, as she unknowingly leaves with the decoy sword. One last time, time, Adar asks Halbrand who he is, but he doesn't answer. If I had lost my family to this guy, you better believe I'd be screaming what he did to them so he remembers. Galadriel gives the decoy blade to Arondir, wiping orc blood off her brother's dagger. He'll end up giving the blade to Theo, who said the blade made him feel powerful, but Arondir gives Theo the chance to redeem himself for giving it up to Adar by asking him to give it over to the Númenóreans to drop into the ocean. Arondir could have done this himself, but gives it to Theo for this purpose. Bronwyn is hailed as a hero by Queen Muriel, and in front of the entire crowd, Halbrand is deemed the true king of the Southlands. Meanwhile, Elendil teaches his son about this special bond between horse and rider. It was a lesson taught to him by Isildur's mother, and he wishes to learn more. It's kind of the first time these two have really bonded, considering Isildur has been this defiant son since we first saw him in episode 3. The destruction of the dam causes the water to flow through the tunnels, creating giant water spouts along Tirharad. The volcanic eruption itself is massive, sending out a giant shockwave and flying rocks of flame. In the commotion, we see that Adar has escaped his chains. Was he let loose, or did he manage to make his own way out? If it's the former, the last person we saw him with was Halbrand. It's hard to believe anyone will survive this massive blast, but if you watch my spoiler section, we can see a bit of what happens. So without further ado, here's your warning, let's get into it. With episode 6 being Númenórean and Arondir centered, it's likely we'll pick up back with the Harfoots. They're on their way to the grove where Nori said there are countless apples and other fruits to pick, but judging by the background here, the place has started to rot. On the tree here, you can see more of these rotten apples. I'm curious if these guys, now officially named the Mystics, will catch up to them. Here we have an eye opening covered in ash. This appears to be Galadriel awakening from the aftermath of the eruption, so we can confirm that she survives, but damn, it does not look like a lot of people made it out of there alive. Here's a character by the name of the Dweller, one of the 3 Mystics. She's using some sort of magic blowing this black smoke. It could be an editing fakeout, but the next shot is of a leaf very similar to that found in Lindon traversing this cave. Last episode we learned of the origin of Mithril, an ancient legend where lightning hit a tree and its roots created this ore. I wonder if this is any way connected to that. There's also this shot of a Balrog, which is different than the shots found in episode 5, so either we're going to see more of this creature or that was simply promotional material to get people more excited about the show. With only 2 episodes left, that's it for the yet to be seen footage. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider liking and subscribing and leave a comment about what you think of the show. Thanks for watching, and for more bad takes you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember,
I felt that.